What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we are here with Theodor of the Almighty Hamferð. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you here as well. This new album is fantastic. I'm going to let you tell me what the name of the album is because I do not want to destroy that. It's such a good album. I don't want to even disrespect it by trying to pronounce it. So just tell me what the name of the album is.
The new album is named Men Gods Hand er sterk.
What you said. It's a fantastic album, and thank you for giving this to us because I do think that the album is very atmospheric and really brings us on an epic journey. All 8 songs really do have a lot of meaning and a lot of atmosphere to it, so thank you for this album. Was there sort of a vision that you had in mind for the making of this album? Being that this is the third Hamferð album, was there sort of like a goal that you were trying to achieve? Were you trying to make like a continuation of the last album? Was this a new beginning? How did this new album sort of see the light of day?
In many ways, it is sort of a new beginning. It's our third full-length record, but we also released an EP as our debut. So we considered our fourth record. Mm-hmm. The EP only has 4 songs, but it's still more than half an hour long.
Yeah.
And the first 3 records, they're conceptually linked. So they're like they're conceptually linked. There's different stories within the same universe, so to speak, which Jon, our singer who does the lyrics, has created. Like reverse chronological, so it goes further and further back to the origin of this whole universe. And with the last record, Thomas's Likam, which we released in 2018, I believe, we closed that trilogy. We decided that's it for that. We finished it up. So for this record, we wanted to do something new and fresh. Mm-hmm. And there are several aspects to that. One of it is the whole lyrical theme and the lyrical concept behind the album, which is based on a historic event. Tragedy during a whale drive in 1915, the village of Sandvík in the Faroes, where our keyboard player, Esmar, he's from there. So part of it was we've been talking about, since he's from there, it's a small village, we've been talking about the episode and somehow incorporating it into Hamferð for many years. So it was pretty obvious to us that once we closed the trilogy of records, we wanted to do an album about that. Mm. And musically, it's the same. Our last record was very much a concept album. The inspiration for it was to try to make one piece of cohesive music, sort of like a symphony, for lack of better description, where all the tracks are like different passages in this one cohesive storyline, both lyrically and musically. For this record, we wanted to do something. We just wanted to write songs. So we focused, stripped back the arrangements a bit, just instead of making this huge cohesive piece, we tried to just focus on getting as simple, good ideas as possible, and to make 8 very, in our opinion, quite different songs. So yeah.
Do you feel that, because being that it was sort of like a trilogy, your last series of albums, do you almost feel that maybe if somebody is just discovering Hamferð now, though, even though that this album is a new beginning, not connected to that trilogy, do you think that maybe a new fan should maybe listen to the previous albums in order to maybe fully get this concept now, or do you think that it doesn't matter really?
I don't think having heard the old records should impact the way you perceive the new record. Of course, it gives probably, if you geek around with it a bit, then it gives an insight to where we're coming from, how the music has developed. I always personally think that's really cool with bands, when you follow their discography through the years and you can hear how the records change, how the songwriting changes, how the production changes, the whole aesthetics, and the whole. I feel the whole songwriting and aesthetic of the record, the new Men Gods Hand er sterk, is definitely built on what we've built with the first 3 records.
Mm-hmm. Has Hamferð always thought of the concepts and the meanings before laying down the music, or is it easier to maybe have some music already present before you know what the material is going to be about?
It's pretty intertwined, and to be perfectly honest, earlier in the process, it's quite independent from each other as well. And we obviously talk to each other. Jon is very much into the lyrics and the whole thematic concept, and me, and historically I've done most of the writing for this record. Aon, our new guitarist, has joined in as well. Definitely, we're inspired by that. But at the same time, the music is its own thing. So we don't sit down with a piece of music and think, what's this about? And write lyrics. And in the same way, we don't base the songs off of the lyrics. They merge in the process, I think.
Yeah. And there's so many of you in the band as well. And I feel I've heard somebody call you guys the Slipknot of the Faroe Islands. But
cool.
But does your own personal life or your own personal experiences guide your hand with how you write the songs as well, or do you kind of use Hamferð as more of an escapism from your personal life?
I think we all. It's a tricky one to give a proper answer to. To be honest, I have to think a little bit. I think Hamferð for all of us, it's like our main creative outlet. It's something which we're very emotionally invested in. But it's I don't know. There's always this duality with metal bands, especially when you go into the more extreme genres where the music can be very dark and sinister and dramatic, and often the darkest bands are like the funniest guys.
Right.
So I don't know if it's because it's directly inspired by our personal day-to-day lives, or if it's just an aesthetic which we enjoy, Okay.
Well, I think because I interviewed Tyr from the Faroe Islands before, I'm sure there's always an association between you guys as well. It's such a small country, but they're having their folk music. Their music is very cultural. It's inspired by the Faroe culture, but there's so many bands from many different countries. Their culture doesn't really play an influence, and I don't really see too much of that in Hamferð. I get an atmosphere. I feel like your music takes me to its own unique world and its own original world and universe. It's not like taking me through a documentary of the Faroe culture, for example.
Cool. The way I see it is, if you listen to a bunch of Swedish bands, you can usually hear straight away that they're Swedish. And same with Norwegian bands, US-based bands, German bands, whatever. There's some basic aesthetics which has to do, I think, with the environment you grow up in, both culturally and in society. All these things, they directly, or in our case, probably more indirectly, influence us to what comes natural to us when we create art. We're quite lucky that we're from a small country, so when we just create what we do, we take inspiration from a place which is quite unique. So that we can do something which is pretty natural to us, but it's not natural to anyone else, so it sounds unique. If that makes sense.
It definitely does. But there's thousands and thousands of bands from Sweden. I've been doing interviews now since 2017, and I speak to at least one Swedish or Scandinavian band a week. And but you're only the second band from the Faroe Islands that I've spoken to, and I'm surprised that there's that many that I got to speak to begin with. Does it almost feel like, and not like saying it, are you lonely or anything like that, but it definitely has to, how many At the Gates clones do we see from Sweden? And then you guys sound very different from a band like Tyr, the only other metal band from the Faroe Islands I could think of. So it seems like, does it ever almost feel like that there is an isolation, not just where you live, but almost kind of like within the metal community as well, that makes you kind of stand out?
If you talk first and foremost about general music scene, if I should talk about the Faroese music scene for just a second, is that music in the Faroe Islands, since it's such a small country, it's historically very non-commercial. If you go to Sweden or basically any bigger city or any bigger country, you have scenes like the Gothenburg scene, the example you just mentioned, where something becomes really cool and you have legions of kids who want to sound like that. Whereas in the Faroes, it's since we're such a small place, it's a very musical country. There's not that many active metal bands, but there's so many good artists, in all sorts of genres, and people just try to create something unique. So, and since it's such a small place, if you do something unique and you do it well, it transcends genres much more than it does in bigger places. So Hamferð, we're pretty obscure doom band in the big scope of things, but we've received a lot of recognition in the Faroes, and we're very closely connected to the music scene. Pop singers, singer-songwriters. We're friends. We play at the same events. We respect each other because everybody does their own thing here, which is really cool.
That's pretty awesome. It feels like a lot of people think that if you are a metal band and you're in a scene with hundreds and hundreds of other metal bands, that's going to help you because there's a community and all that. But if you are a metal band in a place where there's not many metal bands, but there is music, you're going to stand out. People are not going to forget you. I'm sure that somebody like the biggest pop star of the Faroe Islands is still going to be familiar with Hamferð. But the biggest pop star here is not going to be familiar with, Cannibal Corpse.
No, exactly. Yeah, maybe Cannibal Corpse, but
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, totally. It's a very cool dynamic with having such a small society, where like I said, everybody knows each other, everybody collaborates.
Do you and you mentioned also you labeled your style as doom metal, and I mean this is one of my favorite things to mention because I love quote unquote doom, but take some of the bands that have been labeled as doom, Yob, Neurosis, but also look at My Dying Bride, Catatonia, Anathema. They sound very different from each other. Yeah. And you take a band like Sleep, they've been labeled as doom. So what would you say makes something a doom band? Aside from the songs, each song being 11 and a half minutes, what would make something doom?
I think the obvious answer to that is tempo. It's slow music. And it's slow and dark, usually quite down-tuned, quite heavy. But I think it has more to do with the tempo and that you have enough space between the tones. I mean, the original doom band is Black Sabbath, with low-tuned single-note riffs, which is slower than everything else, which is quite cool.
They say Iron Maiden is the original power metal band too. So
yeah. But to us, we're labeled as doom. We are a doom band, but the six of us, we have very different musical styles. So for us, it's more about creating the atmosphere, this kind of darker, it's kind of darker, doomier atmosphere, but to try to incorporate as many different influences as possible, to hopefully try to stick a little bit out of just being a typical doom band. All of those that you mentioned aren't typical doom bands, but there are quite a few typical doom bands out there.
Typical Doom sounds like a great name for a doom metal album, but it's funny too because there have been doom bands that have made songs, and this could just be me experiencing it, but I've seen doom bands that have kind of like, at least in terms of its melody or its key, to be almost kind of uplifting sometimes. So would you say just slow and heavy is kind of all it would need to be?
It's really hard to say. For me, it's a pretty intangible thing. I mean, you can always put labels on it: slow, heavy, dramatic. Most doom is slow and heavy and dramatic in some way. A lot of it is sad, or at least melancholic. But but it's hard to put. I'm really bad at labels. I'm really bad at genres in general. But it's something about the atmosphere where you can feel, okay, this sounds like a doom record.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And you led me perfectly into the final question that I wanted to ask you, is because circling back to the concepts, whether it was this trilogy that you had previously or this new universe that you're expressing through this new album, why do you feel that the style of music that Hamferð plays was the best style of metal to express this meaning?
I think it's something which has naturally developed within us as a band. Well, we started the band, our ex-guitarist John started it in 2008, like 16 years ago now, this year. And he started it as a pretty simple side project because he really liked My Dying Bride. Nobody done doom metal in Faroe, so we should just try to do it. Wrote the song, and then we found that the Faroese history, Faroese nature, it's a pretty rough place here during winters, and historically it's been a really rough place to live. It's beset with it's small communities living together, so whenever there's some sort of tragedy, everybody's affected, and all of these things play into the soul of a place. And the combination of the aesthetic of making doom music with all those themes, the symbiosis it worked really well. So that's in turn inspired us to do more music, and we've developed into that. The six of us, we started playing when we were teens. It's our main band, and now we've been doing it for 15 years. So in many ways, we've grown up together as musicians and as a band, and starting from that foundation, we've just explored it deeper and deeper.
And it's to come from a community where everybody is sharing each other's joy and sharing each other's pain at the same time, that's going to make an impact on you. We live in here in America, we live in a country where everybody tends to think for themselves. What happened to that person has nothing to do with me. I'm not going to feel that. And if somebody says that they feel bad for somebody, a lot of times they're just saying that so they could seem sincere or seem like kind. But a lot of times people don't care. And I think to have that sort of community, I think, is a very inspirational. I think you're not going to get, that's a type of inspiration you're not going to get just anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's probably not just the Faroe Islands. It's a general thing for island communities and for smaller communities. That historically, everybody, you're reliant on each other. You can't make it on your own out here. I guess in bigger cities, bigger places, that's what a lot of people say. At least I've not lived in a big city for many years, but that you get closer relationships to people. I imagine if in New York, most people might not even know their next door neighbor. Person living in.
I lived next to the same people for 9 years. I still don't know their names.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't have that here, and since it's such a small place, you don't really have a class society in the same way as you have many places. You don't have fancy schools. Everybody goes to the same schools. You don't have fancy neighborhoods. You have rich business owners living right next to people who work in the local shop. It's everybody's in it together, and on the same eye height. I don't know if you can say that in English.
Yeah, I mean, New York City, where I'm from, it's the only place where you could be surrounded by millions of people every day, and I live in the middle of it. So it's the loneliest place you could still be. So the Faroe Islands are a chain of islands in the middle of the Atlantic, not connected, but it's a community of people where everybody's together. So therefore, it's almost impossible to be alone.
That's my experience. I guess you have people who are alone wherever you go.
Yeah, well,
but it's a very supportive community, absolutely, and it's like I said, I think it has to do with the history of the place and the size of the place and how everything's connected. One of the title of the record, "Men Godshånd sterk," it's from paraphrase from the last track of the record, which the title track, which is an interview with one of the survivors of this tragedy in 1915, interview from the 50s. And what happened is, 14 young men drowned in the village of Sandvik, where Esmar is from, which was most of the working age men in that small village. But the whole tone of the interviews is, this unthinkable tragedy happened, but people backed up around each other and we persevered. And 100 years later, the small village is still there. And the descendants are still living there. They got through it. And there are so many stories like that.
And it's stories like that kind of, obviously it's a sad, tragic story, but it also does give you hope that people can persevere and overcome so much.
Absolutely.
So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time and for such an awesome conversation, and thank you for your music. This new album, and I'm going to give it a try, Men Goods Honderstück. How did I do?
Pretty good.
Okay.
Pretty good.
I tried my best. Just so this new album is really good. Is there just anything else that you would like to promote for him in the future?
I don't know. Go listen to the record. That's what's most important to us right now. So we've been working for a long time on it, and we're really excited to finally be able to release it, show it to people, hit the road and play some shows. We recorded the album live, the whole band, all of us together. So it's very much a live record intended to be played live. So we can't wait for that. And then hopefully it won't be as many years until the next record.
Yeah, hopefully. I was about to say you guys you almost kind of took the same route as Tool. Not as long, but
yeah. Hopefully not.
I will say that this new album was worth the wait. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody, we are here with Hamferð. Be sure to check out their brand new album, Men Guns Honderstück. Did the best I could there. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.